Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for standing by. Participants over the phone lines are in a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's event. At that time, if you'd like to ask a question over the telephone, you may press star 1 on that touch-tone phone to ask your question. Now, today's conference is being recorded, and it will be posted publicly. If you have any objection, of course, you may disconnect at this time. And now I'd like to turn it over to your host, Ms. Deb Rivera. Thank you, ma'am. You may begin.
Welcome and good afternoon. We appreciate and thank you so much for joining us for this webinar today on Finding 2020 Detailed Demographic and Housing Characteristics File A data on data.census.gov. My name is Deb Rivera, and I will be the host for today's event. In this webinar, we will provide information on the data available from the 2020 Detailed DHCA and how to access it on data.census.gov. I want to thank our colleagues from around the Census Bureau for joining me and helping to support our speaker today. Before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items. Throughout the webinar, we will be sharing helpful links through the chat panel and using the Q&A panel to answer your submitted questions. We are encouraging participants to use the Q&A panel in WebEx to submit questions throughout the presentation, and to keep an eye on the chat panel where we will send links and other helpful information. If you do send questions through the Q&A panel, please make sure to use the All Panelists option to submit, and that way all of our panelists can see your question. We will also have a live Q&A session over the phone line towards the end of the webinar. Participants who would like to ask a question at that time are welcome to press star 1 on their phone. To ensure that we have enough time to get to all participants, we are asking that you please keep inquiries to 1 question and 1 follow-up. For additional questions, you may queue up again as time allows. A quick note on the Q&A session: it will focus on the platform, data.census.gov. We will not be able to go in-depth to address questions on other 2020 census products, the data collection process, disclosure avoidance, or methodology. As always, we are recording the webinar today, and all the materials for this training will be available through the Census Academy website. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, and now I'll introduce our speaker, Tyson Weister. Thank you, Tyson.
Great. Thank you, Deb. And thank you all so much for joining the webinar this afternoon, Finding 2020 Detailed Demographic and Housing Characteristics File A data on data.census.gov. My name is Tyson Weister. I am a data expert on the communications team for the data platform. So our focus today, before we show you how to access the data, we wanted to give you a little bit of background information about the data set itself and also point you to resources to learn more in-depth product and technical documentation. That background is going to set the stage to help us understand the data and tables that are being returned to us and some of the messaging that we see on the site. So specifically, what we're focusing on today are the 2020 Detailed Demographic and Housing Characteristics File A tables that were released last Thursday, September 21st. This data is provided for approximately 1,500 detailed population groups. So whereas previous releases of 2020 census data have been provided for high-level race and ethnic groups or the total population, this set of tables is giving you data for detailed racial and ethnic groups and American Indian and Alaska Native tribes and villages, like Japanese, Navajo Nation, Middle Eastern, and many other groups. To learn more about the data and products, we do encourage you to visit the press kit using the link on the right-hand side of the screen. There is a pre-release webinar that goes into detail about this product that I highly recommend you take a look at. So with that information, though, about the data being provided for detailed population groups, there's 4 tables that were released through this product. Those tables is, first is T01001 that provides data for total population. So for those detailed groups, they'll be getting the total population count table, And then depending on population thresholds, each population group may get one of the age by sex tables for any particular geographic area. So we'll talk more about the specific thresholds for different levels of geographies and different types of group in detail later. For now, we just want to make sure that everyone understands each combination of population group and geography may get the total population table and may get one of the 3 sex by age tables that have varying levels of detail. On the right-hand side of the screen, we show you the outline of the different details that are provided by those age by sex tables. One provides 4 different age categories. The second table, T02002, provides 9 sex by age categories. And then the third table, T02003, provides 23 sex by age categories. So do keep that in mind as you're accessing data on the site. We'll be referencing some of those thresholds here in just a moment. But before we get there, we mentioned the data are provided for different types of geographies. For this release, you'll be getting data for the nation, state, county, census tracts, places, and American Indian areas, Alaska Native areas, and Native Hawaiian homelands. We'll be accessing data for different levels of geographies throughout our demonstration today. All right, so we mentioned these population thresholds a few times now. Here we're showing you what they are on screen for detailed population groups. So there's one set of thresholds, as you can see in the column towards the middle of my screen for the nation and state level. And then there are another set of thresholds or minimum population requirements for sub-state geographies such as counties, places, and census tracts, as well as American Indian areas, Alaska Native areas, and Native Hawaiian homelands. So depending on the population count for the particular population group that you're accessing data for in the specific geography that you're accessing data for, you'll see the different table availability levels for that different population requirement. So we're going to take a look at this on the live site and cross-reference this table throughout our demonstration today. You don't have to memorize these population thresholds, and that's not the reason why we'll be returning to this table, but I just want you to conceptually understand why you're seeing data in some tables and not seeing data in other tables. And it's all about the population thresholds and this adaptive design. So with that background information, we're ready to move forward with showing you how to access the data on the live site. We do recommend using the advanced search or filters in order to select your detailed population groups. We're going to be doing this through the race and ethnicity filter panel on the left-hand side. As we're clicking through, we'll be prompted to make a number of selections. Any words and phrases that are of interest to us that we click on that have chevrons next to them will give us more detailed options to choose from. And once we get to a final search selection, those will be denoted by a checkbox. So ultimately, we're looking to click one or more checkboxes in order to make a final search selection. So let's go ahead and show you just how you can go about accessing these data. For our demonstration, we're going to focus on a few examples to help get us started with the tables and familiarizing ourselves with the availability and messaging. Then we'll show you more complex ways that you can select geographies, population groups, and hit on some different functionality of the site. So to get started, we're going to pull up the detailed DHCA tables for the Tokelauan alone population in the United States. As I'm going through this demonstration today, there is some language about alone population groups or alone or in any combination population groups. Alone means that the people identify with only that race group and they do not identify with any other race groups. Alone or in any combination reflects everyone who identifies with a particular race group, even if they also identify with other race groups as well. So do keep in mind this distinction. As we're working through the site, we're going to see some labels that say alone and other labels that say alone or in any combination. The Census Bureau collects these data in accordance with OMB standards that do allow people to identify with multiple race categories. So the one that you want will depend on the needs for your analysis. We're going to get started with our demonstration for the alone population. So you can follow along on the live site. Go to data.census.gov. On the landing page, we mentioned the first thing we wanted to make sure we're using the advanced search or filters. So you'll click the advanced search link below the single search bar. Then on the left-hand side of your screen, you're going to see different categories that you can click through. Since we're accessing the 2020 detailed DHCA table, I'm going to select those search criteria first by clicking 2020 under the years heading on the left-hand side. Notice that's a checkbox, so that is the final search selection that we see at the top. Next, we'll narrow down the data set. On the left-hand side, choose Decennial Census, and we'll see just the 2020 Decennial Census products that have been released as options for us. You want to click the option for Detailed Demographic and Housing Characteristics File A. So now that we have our year and our data set, we'll choose our population group. On the left-hand side, under the Topics heading, you'll see Race and Ethnicity. Once we click that, we get more detailed options to choose from. So here's where we're clicking through different categories and looking for that checkbox as a final selection. We want to drill into the Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islanders. Then it gives you options to drill into detailed groups, first for the alone groups, and second for the alone or in any combination groups. For this demonstration, we're using alone. So I'll choose detailed Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander alone. It then prompts us for a region to choose from. In this case, the Polynesian region matches our area of interest, so I'll click Polynesian alone, and here we start to see some detailed groups to choose from. So scrolling down, we see the checkbox there in alphabetical order, Tokelauan alone. Once we mark the checkbox, we see that population group in the upper left. So that is an example of accessing these tables for a single population group. If we don't specify a geography, we'll get data for the United States national level. When you're ready to run the search, click that search button in the lower right, then choose the Tables tab at the top. So we mentioned that for table availability, the detailed groups that are available at the national level all get the total population table, and then depending on thresholds, they may get additional sex by age tables. We see just one table result, in this case for our set of filters, and it's the T01001 total population table from the 2020 Decennial Census Detailed DHCA dataset. Notice the United States appears in the column of the table, and the population total is 44. The population group is also a column of the table. So in this case, there's just the one table available, and if you were to go back to that detailed group thresholds table, you would get a population count of 44 and cross-reference this into the table to see that it gets the total count only table because 44 falls between 0 and 499. Moving on to our second example, we're going to look at detailed DHCA tables for the Navajo Nation alone population in the U.S., Oklahoma, and on the American Indian Area, Navajo Nation Reservation, and off-reservation trust land. So going back to the live site, if you click the U.S. Census logo in the upper left, it will start you fresh from the landing page. We'll follow a similar process to what we did before, choosing Advanced Search. Choose 2020. And just like before on the left, we choose the Decennial Census, and then Detailed Demographic and Housing Characteristics File A. So there is a specific reason why I recommend choosing your year and data set first, especially if you're focused on accessing data from this release it helps you narrow down the population groups that appear in the filter panel. We'll talk more about it later on a future slide. But in short, it makes it easier to select your detailed population group that's compatible with this particular data set. So moving forward, we'll click on race and ethnicity on the left, and we'll follow the prompts. In this case, we'll choose American Indian and Alaska Native. Then we'll choose detailed American Indian and Alaska Native alone. Next, I'll click American Indian alone. And we get a list of all of the detailed American Indian tribes in this list. Again, it's in alphabetical order. You could scroll through it to get to Navajo. There's also a search bar at the top of the panel where you can search just the contents of this panel. So if I start typing in Navajo, it will narrow down to anything in that panel that matches the text I've entered. The last thing is to just be mindful you do need to still click the checkbox in order to register a final search selection. So here we have our year, data set, and population group. I'm going to click search in the lower right. We're going to pull up data for these geographies one by one, starting with the U.S. level. So after you click search, we'll click tables at the top. And in this case, notice that we get a total of 4 results that are presented to us by the site. And we're going to take a detailed look at each one of these table options. So T01001, total population, looks similar to the way it was before, except we get a population count of 315,086 people who identify their race as Navajo alone in the United States. Below that, we get the set of T02 tables. 001 is the 4 age categories, 002 for 9 age categories, and 003 for 23 age categories. The one that provides data is based on population thresholds, and Navajo Nation alone will only have data for one of these 3 tables for a particular geography. So what that means is even though the site has returned all of the tables to us, if you click into a table that does not match the population threshold requirement for that table, you will either see data not available message or the population group would not be displayed in the table. In this case, notice for the first 2 sex by age tables, there are 2 instances of data not available messages. This is not an error with the site. It's built this way by design. So just be mindful that you need to click into potentially all 3 of those sex by age tables before you would start seeing data for your combination of population and geography in order to meet the threshold. So because the Navajo Nation alone population is so large, it gets the most detailed sex by age table, and you can see the data are provided once you click into it. And going back, if we were to cross-reference this to the detailed thresholds under nation and state for detailed groups, we know that the population was 315,086, and we see that that is well above the population requirement for this sex by age table at the bottom that provides 23 age categories of 7,000 or more people. So that's why we see data in that table and not in the other 2 sex by age tables. And I go back to this again, not to necessarily memorize that. It's certainly not a step that you have to be doing as you're working through the site. It's simply to provide that understanding. But if we were to add a geography from here, I mentioned accessing the data at the state level. On the left-hand side, there's the filters button. By the way, you can click this in order to expand or collapse these panels as you want and need them. When you have that panel expanded, you can make edits to your search criteria. On the left-hand side, if you'd like to add a geography, we can click here on state and then choose the checkbox for Oklahoma with our next example. We see it as a filter that appears at the top of our screen. And by now we're getting used to the table layout here. So clicking into total population, we see 1,632. And we know that for Oklahoma and the Navajo Nation alone population, we may see sex by age data in one of these three tables. And it's based on the population threshold. Clicking on the first table gives us that data not available message. We don't get discouraged, and we continue through the process to see if the data are provided through the other sex by age tables. In this case, we see it's provided in table 202002, the 9 age category. Going back to our reference slide, we would expect exactly that behavior based on the population thresholds of 1,632 people. When you're accessing data for detailed groups at the nation and state level, it falls within the range provided here. And last thing, to access data for the American Indian area, on the left-hand side for the filters, I mentioned you can make edits to your filter panel. Here, I'm going to click the X to remove Oklahoma for my search criteria. And then I'm going to add the geography for the American Indian area. Notice on the left-hand side of your screen, you get the most common geographies, and then there's a button at the bottom for all geographies. So we don't see American Indian area listed as one of the most common geographies. I'm going to click the All Geographies link. This will give you options to select every level of geography that the Census Bureau has data for on our site. Notice that there are multiple options for American Indian and Alaska Native area. If you'd like to narrow this list of geographies to just the ones that are compatible with our data set, as we've already selected 2020 and the data set DEC, Detailed Demographic and Housing Characteristics File A, you can click the Summary Levels tab at the top. That will remove any level of geography that's not compatible with our current search selections out of our view, so we don't get any dead-end pathways. We get one clean level that says American Indian area, Alaska Native area, Hawaiian homeland. Summary level 250, that's the 3-digit code associated with this type of geography. So just another tip to help you find the geographies you're looking for. We'll go ahead and click into there. It gives us a list of every American Indian area in the U.S. I'll click into the search box and type in Navajo and mark the checkbox, Navajo Nation Reservation and Off-Reservation Trust Land. So what this would be giving us data for are specifically people who identified their race as Navajo Nation alone, and they also live on the Navajo Nation Reservation and Off-Reservation Trust Land. In this case, we're presented with the two tables that actually have data for this specific combination of population group and geography. The total population that meets this criteria is 141,122. And based on the population requirements, it gives the most detailed sex by age table. Going back to our thresholds, we would expect this behavior once again. Just be mindful that we would be reading the population thresholds for the substate in A, I, A, N, and H column of the table based on the level of geography that we were working with. Population threshold is well above, or the population of the group is well above the threshold of 20,000, so that table would be displayed for us. All right, so we're going to take a break from consulting those tables for a bit, but at least you understand the messaging that you see on the screen, why you get data availability messages in some instances, or why you may not see every single table listed for your combination of geography and population groups. Wanted to review one other tip I mentioned was that you should select your year and data set first as a tip to help you more easily select the correct population group on our site. The reason for this is that the population group filters can change from year to year, and Navajo Nation is a prime example of this. So on the screenshot I'm showing at the top, I've already selected my year and data set. That will limit just the checkboxes I see in the race and ethnicity filters to those that are compatible with that year and data set selection. If I didn't select the year and data set, filters first, as shown on the bottom of this screen, where I have 0 filters selected, and I click into the race and ethnicity filter, there are actually 2 options available for Navajo Nation. So one is called Navajo Nation Alone, the other is called Navajo Alone. I would have to know as a user that Navajo Alone provides data for the 2000 census and Navajo Nation Alone provides data for the 2020 census. So this is why you may want to go ahead and select your year and data set first, so you don't have to worry about clicking into incompatible options that take you to old data. Right, moving on to our next example, we showed you kind of simple examples of combinations of single population groups and single geography. We'd like to show you how to select multiple geographies. For this example, we're going to pull data for the Egyptian alone or in any combination population across all counties in Maryland. So clicking on the U.S. Census logo in the upper left, start as fresh, and just like before, we'll click Advanced Search. We mentioned selecting our year, 2020 first, and then we'll choose Decennial Census and look for that detailed demographic and housing characteristics file A checkbox. Next, I'll choose my population group under race and ethnicity. Middle Eastern is within the white category, so we'll click white. White alone or in any combination. In this example, we mentioned we wanted the Egyptian alone or in any combination, so I'm going to choose the second option here, detailed white alone or in any combination. And then we see Middle Eastern or North African alone or in any combination. Once we get into that, we see all of the groups in alphabetical order. I'll mark the checkbox Egyptian alone or in any combination to register that final search selection. The last thing I'll do is choose my geography on the left. We see county, Maryland, and all counties within Maryland. So we have our year, data set, population group, and geography selection. I'll click the search button in the lower right, and then we'll click tables at the top. So let's see, how do these tables come back to us when we've selected multiple geographies in a single population group? It still goes by the threshold. So in your first table, T01001, what we're getting data is for every county in Maryland that has 22 or more people that identify their race as Egyptian alone or in any combination. So as we scroll to the right of the table, we will see data for every county where the Egyptian population meets that threshold. For the remaining sex by age tables, we'll see the data also based on population thresholds where one geography may appear in up to one of the 3 tables. For instance, if we click into T02001, we see data for some of the geographies, but not as many counties as we saw from the total population table. Going back, I wanted to show you a little bit of the functionality on the site, how to save the results. At the top-hand ribbon of your table, there's a More Tools button on the right. When you click that, you'll see some options to output your results. You want to use Excel or CSV if you want output that looks similar to what you see on screen. The zip file format will give you machine-readable output, and I'll show them both to you quickly. Excel is the most popular readable format, so we'll choose that to start with. Most likely, you'll want to click onto the second tab that says Data, and notice that this is laid out very readable and similar to what you saw on screen on the table display. This is also a great output if you'd like to print the table. Alternatively, again, if you wanted to work with the data in your machine, you would most likely choose the zip file format. You would follow the prompts and click Download CSV. And when you open up that zip file, you're going to get a set of 3 files associated with each table you chose to download. Give it a second just to load up here. The file that you typically would want to open is the one that ends in data.csv in the naming convention. Here it's the second file in that list. And we get our output. Notice it is not formatted or indented or anything like that meant to be readable. It's a flat file format. You'll get an individual row of data for each combination of geography and population groups. So here in column C, we're getting those population totals for the Egyptian alone or in any combination population across our geographies. Also, under More Tools, there's a Share button. This allows you to share the table on social media and email. It also provides another way to access the link, also shown in the URL in your address bar, if you'd like to return to the table later or share it with a colleague. And then another way that you can make use of the site is to create a map of the data. So all of our maps are table-based. That means you can map out any estimate you see in our data tables. You click on Maps in order to get started with that process. On the left-hand side, you'll want to make sure you're still clicked into the table that contains the data you want to make a map of. So in this case, I'm clicked into the total population table. You'll want to make sure that your map is set to your level of geography. We can confirm this visually on our map that we're seeing counties in Maryland. We see county in the legend. And if you needed to make a change to that level of geography, you could do so with the layer button. But for now, we're good at county. The last thing that we'll do is verify the data in our table. If you click the drop-down menu in the upper left, you'll see the available options. So this table actually only has 1 row in the table, so there's only 1 data point to make a map of. It's the total population, but if you are dealing with the larger table, you may see additional variables to choose from below. And if I had selected more than 1 population group, you would be able to click into the dimensions and change the one you made a map of. But right now, we are set to exactly what we wanted to make a map of, the total Egyptian alone or in any combination population across all counties in Maryland. The map shows us that counties with darker shades of blue have higher populations that identify as Egyptian. You can zoom in on your map in order to see more labels and streets populate. You can also click an individual area and see, as an example, in Montgomery County, Maryland, there were 2,084 people who identified their race as Egyptian. All right, and last quick example, wanted to show you about selecting multiple population groups in a single geography. We're going to use, for this example, select the Mexican population group, as well as all Central American detailed population groups in San Antonio, Texas. Back on the live site, we'll start fresh from the landing page, and by now you're masters at getting to the advanced search. And we know to select our year 2020 and that decennial census data set for detailed demographic and housing characteristics file A. We've got that down pat. Now let's select our population groups. On the left, we'll choose race and ethnicity. And then we see the category Hispanic or Latino. There's an option detailed Hispanic or Latino. And I see 2 that I need. I'll click in Central American to start. You get a list of all of the population groups for Central American origin. You can click them individually or choose the checkbox at the top in order to select all of those groups at once in just that click. Now, if you need to go backwards through your panel, you can click the chevron at the top. That's going to take you back 1 click. And on the left-hand side, you also have the option of starting over by clicking race and ethnicity and working your way in from scratch. So we'll do that to select Mexican, Hispanic or Latino, detailed Hispanic or Latino, Mexican, and then, again, we have to mark a checkbox to make a final selection. So here I've selected multiple population groups with those 2 clicks. The last thing I'll do is select San Antonio On the left-hand side, that would be classified as a place, so we'll choose that geography level. Following the prompt, choose Texas. And rather than scroll to San Antonio when this loads, we'll click into the search box and type in San Antonio and mark the checkbox. Reviewing our search criteria, year, data set, population group, and geography, we'll click the search button in the lower right and tables at the top. So let's make sense of what we're looking here on screen. We get 4 table results. The first table, T01001, total population, gives us data for all of the population groups that we selected that meet the threshold. So this would be detailed groups with 22 people or more, or regional groups, which we'll talk about more in just a moment, that have 94 people or more living in San Antonio. The groups are in the columns of my table, so as I scroll to the right and left, I see those data for the population groups in San Antonio. For the remaining sex by age tables, for each population group, we may see data in up to one of the tables, depending on the population thresholds. So we see some of the detailed and regional groups in table T02001 based on population threshold. We see other detailed groups in the second table, T02002. And then the last table has another detailed group. Case we're looking at data for the Mexican population. So pretty similar when we selected multiple geographies in one population group or multiple population groups in one geography. They're all assigned to these tables based on thresholds. Now, I mentioned in the demonstration a term called regional groups. These are race and ethnicity groups for the entire region, so areas such as European, Middle Eastern or North African, Caribbean, Polynesian, Central American, those are all considered regional groups, and they have an entire different set of population thresholds at the nation and state level and at the sub-state level. So if you're seeing something unexpected in terms of the tables that are returned to you, you may want to double check if you're working with a detailed or regional group. And if you're wondering how you would know whether it's a regional group or detailed group, we have something called an iterations list. This lists the different population groups that are provided for in this data set. When you open the list in Excel, your regional groups will have asterisks indicated. Any group that you see that does not contain asterisk or boldface are examples of detailed groups. So in this case, the list is showing us that Central American is the regional group, and that includes the detailed groups Costa Rican, Guatemalan, Honduran, etc. In order to access this list, we've included the link as well as a QR code for your reference. Now let's talk about some more resources to learn more before we open up for your questions. I mentioned earlier the press kit has helpful information, including the link to the pre-release recorded webinar that we highly recommend you take a look at. You'll also find in the press kit American Count stories about how the data are being used, technical documentation, the iterations list, code lists, crosswalks, how-to materials, and other helpful links. And if you'd like to learn more about accessing the data on data.census.gov, we have a suite of educational materials to help you make the most of this release. On the left-hand side, you'll see a link to our video tutorial page where you can access short videos. We have 5 on accessing the data through data.census.gov, including one that explains the adaptive design and population thresholds in more detail. And we also have videos with supplemental material in PDF format on the right-hand side of your screen if you prefer step-by-step screenshots. Next, we also wanted to let you know that you can access the data through our Application Programming Interface, or API. We put together dedicated resources to help you access this information through the data set. On the left-hand side of the page, you'll see videos and PDFs, and on the right-hand side of the page is the link to get started with with the API through census.gov/developers. And we'd like to encourage you to sign up for email updates. When you visit the QR code or link on the screen, you can type in your email address and subscribe to data.census.gov updates. This will alert you to the latest educational opportunities, data releases, and system improvements for data.census.gov. We also invite you, if you have questions or suggestions on how we can make the data easier for you to access, simply click the feedback link under the single search bar. That will allow you to email us at census.data@census.gov, and we look forward to engaging with you. At this time, I'll turn it over to Deb.
Great. Thank you, Tyson. So in just a few moments, we will begin our question and answer session. Today, we will be taking your questions over the phone line. So if you have questions related to today's content, we invite you to queue up. And as a reminder, we also ask that you ask one question and one follow-up, just so that we can allow time for other questions that are in the queue. But before we move on to the Q&A, I would like to invite you all to give us your thoughts on today's webinar through an evaluation survey. If you have any notes for us to help improve these webinars, or if you have any ideas on topics that you would like us to see cover in a future webinar, please take a moment to fill out this survey now. I'm going to go ahead and send all of the relevant information in the chat. Now, if you have questions remaining after our session concludes today, please feel free to reach out to one of the email inboxes listed here. Members of the public can reach out to the Center for Enterprise Dissemination for data.census.gov related questions and also training requests. Members of the media can contact the Public Information Office at PIO@census.gov. And for product questions related to 2020 Census data products, please reach out to 2020.census.paperwork@census.gov. So with that, let's go ahead and start the Q&A session. Operator, can you please provide instructions?
Yes, and thank you very much. If you would like to ask a question over the telephone, please press *1. Please state your name. That is needed so you know when your line is open. So *1. And our first question, sir, your line is now open.
Well, I hope you can hear me. Is that confirmed?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. Dealing with the regional, or should we say the various categories, homeless, disabled, senior, is that broken down in there? And you've got for population, you have not seen that I've seen for percentage to your population. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you for your question. So in terms of percentages, they are not provided through this set of tables. If you'd like to calculate percentages, though, you would have the underlying data to make percentages. And then in terms of the topics covered, only total population and sex and age data are provided through this release. So that would cover your senior category if you wanted to take a look at some of those details and information. However, for disability status, that would be something that would be covered through the American Community Survey, so you may want to take a look at some of the special race, not through the 2020 detailed DHCA products, but there's American Community Survey products that may meet your needs called Selected Population Tables and American Indian Alaska Native Tables. So I'd invite you to write in your specific question to us, and we could research further in order to give you better direction in terms of accessing the disability data.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Our next question, sir, your line is open.
Good afternoon. I've not spent a lot of time with your database, so forgive this question. I live in New Mexico, a state with a lot of military bases. Do you have census data on the populations of those military bases?
Thank you for your question. So some military bases are classified as census designated places. Those are any statistical area or community that is known by name and has a boundary for statistical purposes, but doesn't have an official government. So for military bases, some are considered census designated places. I believe you might be able to also look at census tracts and see how those may align with some military bases, but not every military base is individually accessible through those individual geography selections. We do collect information and tabulate them, including every military base, but you may not be able to specifically separate that one geography out.
So in essence, the answer to my question is no.
The answer is we collect data for the entire population, including data for everyone on military bases, and you can access the data specifically on some military bases for that exact area.
Thank you both. If you do have a question over the telephone, please press *1. Ma'am, your line is open.
Hey, you guys. I was just wondering, as far as AI and the commute, if I was to, create commutes on the census, census.com to for information that I'm trying to understand and whatever. Is there a software embedded into the website, since we can't have registered accounts, that AI can pretty much help us record our commute on where we're going within the census.com or .org, U.S. Census, the information that we're getting for our circumstances or for our to deepen our understanding. I didn't notice that there was a way for us to create or register an account with the U.S. Census to where AI could help us remember our commute. Are you following me a little bit?
I think what you're referring to is beyond the scope of what we're talking about in this webinar as far as the data availability for detailed population groups. Mm-hmm. I would invite you to write in with your question, though, and we can point you into a better direction. We do have, as far as accessing data, you may want to check out the application programming interface. And for your awareness, we do have information through survey data collected on commuting, such as average travel time to work and mode of transportation.
No, I'm talking about on your website, because I have a memory. I have challenges with memory. Other people crashing in on the website, drop calls, stuff like that. So I was just wondering how stable is U.S. Census when it comes to our commute within the website. Like, how the steps that you took us through is pretty much a commute, not of the data, the commute of the data. So I struggle with the memory thing and trying to get a solid routine, and I was wondering if your U.S. Census website was stable enough to where we can register our names and it can log our commute on assessing the data, so it can be easily retrieved later on when we come back to access the data and apply those applications for grants or funding or whatever we're doing with it. But for me, it's deeper understanding of my environment.
Sure. I would invite you to write in your question and we can discuss offline.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Our next question is, sir, your line is open.
Hi, thank you for the presentation today. It's great. I have a question about what you touched base on earlier about the detailed group relationship to the regional groups. If I wanted to do, first question and a quick follow-up. So detailed groups, the totals for those detailed groups should total the singular total for the regional group, correct?
That is my understanding. By the way, we do have some subject matter experts on the line, so if I misspoke there, they're welcome to chime in if they have more detail, but I understand that to be correct.
Great. Second quick follow-up. So for the alone, say, for example, Mexican alone or Mexican in combination, alone or in combination, that Mexican alone number would be a subset included, right, as Mexican alone or in combination, right? So if I'm doing detailed percentages, I want to make sure I'm not double counting. So if I'm presenting numbers on Mexican alone in combination with, that also includes Mexican alone, correct? Just as an example. I don't want to double count. That's my higher goal.
So yes and no. You are definitely getting the alone or in combination part correct and the subset part correct. The only thing that isn't completely correct with what you said is alone or in combination is only applied to race groups. So that would be white, Black or African American, American Indian, Alaska Native, Asian, Native Hawaiian, and other Pacific Islander in the subgroups. Hispanic or Latino and Mexican are what we call ethnicity, so they're two separate concepts. For that, you are marking that you are Hispanic or not Hispanic, and there aren't alone or alone in combination groups in association with Hispanic origin and Mexican.
Wow, that's great clarification. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep, and just to follow up on that, this is Paul. We would recommend using for Hispanic origin groups, we would recommend using the filter for Latino and using those counts because if you're looking at Latino groups alone and alone or in any combination, you're only looking at Latinos who replied to the race question. Some don't. And so for a full count, we would recommend using the Hispanic or Latino origin filter and then using those counts where possible.
Super. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
At this time, I have no further questions over the phone lines.
I'll share
so much, operator. Oh, Tyson, I'm sorry. I'll cut in just really, really quickly because I did see a question that came in through the Q&A panel, and I wanted to address it. It's related to data.census.gov, and I think it might be helpful to some of our participants. The question reads, when selecting filters, does the order of selection of the filters matter to the search?
So if you select whatever you select first in your filter, it can help you as you work through the filter panel. So when I make a selection in the panel, the site will start thinking and then it will reload with just the set of options that are compatible with the one I've already selected. So it can help you as you, in the process of making your selections, to select them in a certain order. However, the end result, if you select 3 filters in one order and the same 3 filters but in a different order, you're still going to get the same table results at the end. It just may make it easier for you to work your way through the panel and make those selections by doing them in a certain order to include selecting your year and data set first, as an example.
Great. Thank you for being gracious, Tyson, and thanks for the question. So I'll go ahead and turn it over back to you.
Great, and as we're waiting for maybe any more last-minute questions to come in, I did want to share additional resources with you to data.census.gov and data in general. The first is the data.census.gov resources page. If you visit the link shown here on the slide, QR code, or click the Help button, under the single search bar, it will take you to this resource page. It's your one-stop shop to get all things data.census.gov, including our full set of video tutorials, full-length recorded webinars, upcoming data releases, how-to materials, answers to FAQs. There's also a workshop section that allows you to access hands-on workshops. We have 2 to 3 hour workshops. If you want some hands-on practice to make the most of data.census.gov, you'll be able to watch someone do a demonstration, complete an exercise, and then work through it as a group. We do offer those regularly every month, so if you don't see something that meets your schedule now, please continue to check back regularly. There's 3 data.census.gov ones: basic, advanced, and mapping. And beyond that, we also have data dissemination specialists and census.gov/academy. So if you're looking for something not data.census.gov specific, census.gov/academy is the centralized training hub for the Census Bureau that has training materials on all topics, tools, and surveys. You can also reach out and request local training. They're located throughout the country, and there is a data dissemination specialist assigned to your area. You can reach them at census.ask askdata@census.gov or 1-844-ASK-DATA. And I'll pause and see if there's any additional questions we're taking, or
if you have a question over the phones, please press star 1. One moment, please. Well, thank you very much. I have no further questions at this time.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for tuning into the webinar. We will be posting the webinar as well as the slides that contain the step-by-step instructions and clicks we worked through today, so you'll have those as resources to look back on. And thank you. We hope to see you again in a future webinar.
Conference is concluded. Thank you very much for your participation. You may please disconnect at this time.